In this video I'm going to show a little bit more of the mini boss that I've been working on. Yeah, so I'm pretty much just going to wing it, so we'll see how it goes. I'm just going to show him in action a little bit. So the idea was that he's kind of like a normal enemy, just much stronger, and he does have a little bit of a different behavior. But yeah, so he can't hurt me right now, and I can kill him pretty easily. So the idea is that you kind of put him into this stunned state, and then you can kill him. But obviously it's you know, sort of timed a little bit. So, and if you didn't kill him then you have to kind of put him into the stunned state again, and then you can kill him. So there he goes. The other thing is he kind of resists your attacks, and like with my other enemies, you can basically interrupt their attacks by attacking them. So as soon as you attack, you push them, and they kind of, I mean, they pretty much stop attacking, and then you know, if you don't kill them, then they can attack you again, and so on. That kind of, if you put it like one-on-one, that puts you in a very big advantage, which is, you know, the way it should be, like being a ninja versus a undead whatever mummy creature thing. But in sort of a group environment, if the enemies can overwhelm you a little bit, then that's not that, yeah, it still helps you that you can do that, but it helps you a little bit less because they could maybe attack you from behind. And so that system works pretty well for the small enemies that can kind of group around you and stuff like that. So you still have to move around and sort of fight them. You can't just stand there and you know, whatever. Even though you can actually interrupt their attacks quite easily, you can block them and they can keep attacking. And the other thing that I also implemented is a block break. So the enemies now has the ability to break your block, but only the strong. I have the big axe wielding guys that you would have seen in some of my older videos. They can break your block with one particular attack, and then of course the boss can break your block at any point. So but yeah, just back to the boss attack. So when the boss attacks you, you can't just interrupt his attacks by hitting him like you can do with the small enemies. So that was a new thing. That I had to set up for the boss. So basically, I split out. So I've got my base enemy blueprint, which I actually don't even remember how much I've shown of this, but it's a pretty basic blueprint that just does, you know, it just takes care of, like, I mean, my enemies are pretty simple. They walk around, they look for the player. This isn't the AI, of course, but this allows the AI to, you know, this will take care of, like, when he attacks and stuff like that, playing the correct animations and all that kind of stuff. So I decided for the boss, even though the boss is kind of like a normal enemy, I decided to break his blueprint. For the AI side, I'm just going to show the AI first quickly. This is still the AI, which I know I've shown it, but I don't think I've explained it much, and I'm not going to explain it now, but pretty much there's two major things. The one is to find a random location and just basically a projected point like around the player somewhere, and to find the player. And based on certain things. You know, so the random point is based on a random number to either go to a random point sometimes, or sometimes go for the player, but mostly go for the player, depending on how close to the player the enemy is and stuff like that. So a bunch of this is purely just to to branch off, like, when do you go for the player, and when you reach the player, what do? You attack, and that's it. That's basically the AI. So the boss AI is the same, except he always goes for the player. But I broke his I sort of broke his branches or whatever into so the pawn that I use is my base enemy pawn, but for the boss I created a new base pawn, and so I can check if it's a normal enemy. It's just if this is valid. So there's two. So I can use the same AI blueprint for both the boss and the enemies, because they essentially do the same thing. The boss just never goes to a random point. The boss always tries to attack the player. But then on the actual pawn, the boss is fairly different. So like I've mentioned, the one thing is that you can't interrupt his attacks. So normally I would come in and based on the damage go through and have these montages that would play based on. So for the normal enemies, I have if I'm doing a special move, which is like a jump move or a running jump move or some more heavy attack, they would get pushed back more, and so that breaks into into a different montage, and I just do a flip-flop between two different ones so that it doesn't repeat. And then actually that's the normal attack, sorry. It's like if you just stand there hitting the guy, then he'll kind of flinch to the left and to the right, like flip-flop between those. And then when you do a special move, he'll get pushed back much more, and that's only one because the loop on that is much longer. Like you can't do just one after the other, so it's less it's less necessary. And if I don't have to if I don't feel like I need to do it, I don't do it, so I can move forward with the project, right? I try and do the absolute least amount of animations that I feel are necessary at this point. And it goes and it pushes back, and after a little bit the enemy will reset. Now for the boss, I don't want to be able to interrupt the attack, so I just do a check and I see I actually count like up to a certain amount, so I can hit him a certain amount of times and then do the it's just a basic count setup that allows the pushback to play. So I hit him a few times, and then he can get pushed back, and then kind of rinse and repeat like that. And then when you don't do when I don't do the pushback, I do basically an additive blend hit reaction. So he reacts, he just doesn't stop attacking. So see if I can show it. So he's risen. So it's a bit of a weird setup, I guess, but I kind of flip-flop between two hit reactions again, and I just use this use this blend. So if it's if it's you know, 1 or 0, it'll be one or the other. So I actually flip-flop it in the main blueprint, in the pawn blueprint, and then just set it to 1 or 0, and then it's basically like that. So if you look at the character, it's kind of like that, and I have to switch between them because there we go. So it's kind of like that, so it doesn't affect his arms, and it's additive. So if he's busy attacking, it'll you know, it's in front of the so this is where the montage gets played, and this stuff happens in front of the montage. So on top of everything else, I can add that little like shoulder push that just gives you a little bit of feedback that you're actually hitting the guy and he's reacting. He's just not getting phased by it until you hit him enough, and then you get the pushback. So that's what this mess. Okay, so essentially what this, so my normal thing would just go straight through, but now this splits it up, so it counts, like hit him, okay, his health is, you know, I've done like maybe 80 damage or whatever, so do the pushback and then go on from there, and then again like start the count from 0 again and do it again. The way the death works is, so that's what this whole mess of stuff is over here. So I mean the whole thing looks like a mess, but anything that's not currently sort of in you know, in a frame is new stuff that I added just so that I can control. So really what I wanted to do is put him, you hit him, so you can push him, you can get the pushback a bunch of times before he actually is supposed to be dead. But on the final pushback, you'll get pushed back and then put into a stunned situation. So it'll be like that. So now he's stunned, and now I can hit him. You can see there the additive animation. He'll get out of it after a little bit. But once he's stunned, I can only kill him once he's stunned. So now he's stunned, and now I can kill him, but I have to kill him with a special move, right? That's sort of the one, I guess, gimmick that goes through the game, is like the special moves is always used for some, and it's used to charge your sword. When you're fighting normal enemies, you use it to charge your sword. Same thing here, but this basically forces you, but you can kill normal enemies without using the special move, but then you just don't get the sword charge. On the boss, I force you to use the special move to kill the boss, so you get your sword charge, and now you can break the gate. And I've also added this sort of charge line around the gate, so you can see, okay, now the gate's charged, now I can break the gate, and again I have to use a special move to break the gate. So before, you can just kind of keep hitting it and it'll break eventually, but yeah, I always had it like, I always wanted to make it where you have to use the special move to do it. I didn't really think about it too much, and I didn't really know exactly how I wanted to do it, but just yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever, I kind of came up with this idea, and I like it because recently I changed the sword. So when the sword is fully charged, now it'll go that pink, sort of purple pink color. So you know when you get the color change, something happened. So you know, you immediately aware that it is now charged. And the same with the gate. So now the one idea I had was to actually transfer the charge from the sword into the gate. Like as you charge up the gate, your sword discharges. I might still do something like that. That's the only thing that kind of, still like that might be pretty cool. It's not necessary, but it might be cool. But now, so I always wanted to have the gate sort of generate some kind of thing where you see what you're doing to it, sort of, and then you can break it. But anyway, so so the boss, before you can kill him, you have to do the pushback. Then he goes into the into the stunned state, and then you can kill him while he's in the stunned state. As soon as he comes out of that state, then you have to stun him again before you can kill him. So really, I mean, it feels kind of useless to even show the blueprint, but all it really is so I'm recording the health, and as soon as he's dead, so I have a gate that is hooked up to the this is where the pushback essentially happens. So as soon as he gets pushed back, I do a check and I see it runs into this gate, and as long as this gate's closed, I'm not going to be able to kill him. As soon as I took down his health enough, now he's dead already, but now he goes into the he gets pushed back and the gate opens, and now I can go or the gate opens and then he gets pushed back, and now I can go into the stunned state, right? So I stop attacking, doing all that stuff, and yeah, so the is stunned, this is actually read by the animation blueprint as well. So the animation blueprint knows to go into stunned, right? And so for the first 2 seconds, as soon you do the pushback, all that stuff happens. During that event, like as he gets pushed back and kind of blends into the stunned state, you can't do anything to him, and then as soon as he's kind of standing there wobbling around, then you can kill him. So that's what this 2-second delay is, and then he's stunned for 5 seconds, and then you can go back, so as long as he's not dead. So I just do a check there because as soon as I kill the guy, then the pawn is still around. There can still stuff happen. So just make sure that I don't do any of this reset if I actually killed him during that 5 seconds. So I give him another 100 health. So you have to stun him again. That health number may go down or up or whatever, that that'll depend. Like I say, he's in test mode right now, so the values are not actually the correct values, although 100 is probably about what it's going to be, I'm guessing. Out of like his total health value may be around 700 or something. I'll see how it plays. He might be fairly difficult, just for the pure fact that he's going to be quite relentless, like he's not really going to stop attacking you just because you're hitting him. So you can see the reaction there. It's there, but he kind of keeps hitting you, and put him into the stunned state. I mean, way too soon, because his health is way down. I think his health currently is also at 100. I'm not sure. It's pretty low. The other thing I needed to change from the normal enemy is, you see he attacks and then he goes into the walking and then walks to you and then he goes into the attack. So with my other enemies, the attack will just get interrupted, and you know, whenever he needs to go into the walking animation or idle or whatever the case is, the attack will just immediately get interrupted right there. So for the boss, I needed the attack to play out before he goes into the walking animation. So there he hit first and then goes into walk, finishes hitting and then goes into walk, you know, finish hitting and then goes into walk. And sometimes, depending on how far you are, you know, he might have thought that you're still too close at that point. But really what that does is it kind of it makes it so you can't just interrupt his attack very easily, number one, and number two, it's not too jarring, because you know, look at the swing on that. Like, if I interrupted it in the middle of the swing, it just wouldn't look right. Whereas the smaller enemies, you can interrupt them in the middle of the swing and it doesn't look too bad, as long as you have a decent blend on it. It feels all right, it's not too bad, and they can be still pretty reactive. Like, the boss doesn't need to be as reactive, because you're in a small area. You know, you need to kill him, you can't get further in the game without killing him, and you know, stuff like that. So and he's very dangerous. As soon as you get close to him, that, you know, he's gonna be very powerful. You're gonna die pretty easily. You're gonna have to use the dodge and the blocking and stuff too, you know. Whereas with the normal enemies, you hardly ever have to block, really. You know, you can fight them pretty easily, but with the boss, it's gonna be a little bit of a bigger challenge. Yeah, so there was that, and then so the way I ended up dealing with that is just using a timer, a timeline. It was just it's just easier for me sometimes to do that instead of using a timer and dealing with it like that. And there was a reason there was a specific reason why I used the timeline. I think it was to get to, I don't remember. I knew I wanted to get to time, or I wanted to do something specific. But anyway, I ended up just using that. It's the same thing. It's not a big deal. So really, all it is as soon as I call the stop attacking, which is called from the AI blueprint, call stop attacking. So my attack loop runs on tick and just runs through a branch, and then as soon as I kill that branch, it'll, you know, it won't loop anymore, and then it'll run the timer out, or the timeline, and then actually only go into the the next state, whatever it might be. It can go back into attacking for, like, you know, for all intents and purposes, but it could go back into, it can go into idle or walking or whatever at that point. But the point is, it's delayed, that you know, the attack doesn't get interrupted immediately. It's delayed by a what's it, like a second and a half, yeah. The other thing I needed to do was, so yeah, so I have this massive capsule on him. The player, the way my enemies work, or the way my player works, whenever I jump, I ignore any enemy collisions. Whenever I do any special moves, I ignore any enemy collisions, and the reason for that is so you never get stuck on anything when you do those moves. So when you do something like, when you do a move like that, right, you don't want to get stuck on anyone. You basically just want to slice through the group. So ignore collisions. When you're jumping around and doing stuff like this, you don't want to get stuck on anything, right? You just want to move through, and it works really well, like ignoring collisions on the enemies. It doesn't, it's all about the gameplay. Like it feels bad when you collide into stuff the whole time, even though it's completely impossible in reality, right, to move through things. It just feels good for the game to be able to move through. And the jump, I specifically did it because you just don't want to have this situation where you could sometimes land on top of an enemy's head. And the engine has a built-in thing for that, where it'll bounce you off the head, but that just doesn't feel good at all. So in all cases, as soon as you jump, for any jump move, any jump or any jump attack move or anything like that, switch off collision. And like I said, for any special move, any move where you move fast, forward or something like that, switch off collision. And when it switches back on, if you stand inside of an enemy collision, it would just separate the two immediately, instantly. And so that works really nicely with the normal small enemies, because everybody's capsule is pretty small. With the big enemy, like this boss, the capsule's pretty big, and so that separation is very jarring and not very good looking. And also, I don't want you to be able to jump over this guy or through him, right? He needs to, because he's big and he's, he needs to be in your way, more so than the cannon fodder enemies, the small enemies. So I have this big capsule that I use for that. So you can still slice through him with the appropriate moves that needs to be able to slice through him, but you can't just do it at all times like you can with the small enemies. So that's what this capsule is for, and it's massive like this because my jumping move, my straight up jumping move actually jumps quite high. And I don't want to, just don't want the situation where you can still move underneath you or something. And then this is his main capsule. So this actually will block the player. This will also block the player, but that's like his main capsule that the spawn uses. And I can't make that massive. I have to use a separate capsule for that. So what I also do is, while the enemy attacks, I dynamically scale the capsule bigger, so you can't run in on the enemy too closely, so that it just feels bad when you can get too close to the enemy. And I actually do this dynamic scaling on the small enemies as well, and that's something I added recently. I haven't done it, I've never shown it. It's not part of any of my previous gameplay demos or anything like that. It works pretty well. Okay, so on the small enemies, I guess in talking about the next part, which number one, it's to prevent the player from moving too close to the enemy, and number two, it's to prevent the enemy from getting too close to the player. So I use actually a similar, I use like a dynamic capsule scale on the player. Let me just get a clean area. So you see when I'm close to this thing, as soon as I attack, I push away a little bit, so my arms don't get too heavy into the wall there. So you see that? So that's scaling the capsule dynamically, just to push the player away from the wall just a little bit, just so that you don't completely bury yourself in the wall when you know your legs and stuff doesn't go into the walls. So it's for the same reason. It's just to keep things at a certain distance. So that works. That alone works pretty well on the small enemies, but on the big enemy, because of this extra capsule, this is not part of the sort of the character physics and stuff like that. This is essentially just a moving blocker, and yeah, it can cause some pretty bad things, like you can force the player into the wall and stuff like that, and bad things happen essentially. So I still actually do use the capsules, the dynamic scaling, for the player running into the enemy, but for the enemy coming too close to the player, I do something different. I actually so this runs on tick. It doesn't. I think I just permanently run it, but it'll. It's actually yeah. So I didn't put any special branching in here. It just always ticks this, but it'll only actually tick through the doing the actual thing if if I'm close enough to the player, and if I'm not, if the enemy is not being attacked, basically. So really all this does is just to show the reasoning for that. So in all my attack animations, I actually use root motion to create the forward motion. So if I switch off root motion there, so you can see actually, so he steps forward. So obviously with root motion enabled, and it'll flip-flop between this animation and this animation. So that one steps forward way more than the other one. So as he attacks, he keeps stepping forward, and so that's why I create that dynamic scaling capsule on the small enemies. So he'll keep stepping forward, but he'll collide into you and then kind of stick to, stay in place and never get closer. But on the boss, because he can kind of squish you into the walls and do weird things, I use this thing where I basically force the location. So as soon as I enable this lock position, I get the current location, and then I set the capsule, the main capsule, to that location, and so that essentially overrides the root motion, and it also allows the character to not keep squishing into the player with that extra capsule. And so the final thing that I needed to make this work, because the distances are kind of close, ultimately the boss can still can still get into a position where, like, if I run around the top and he chases me there, and I come down here and he comes down here as well, he's now close to the wall. He's not always coming in from the middle towards the wall. He can end up close to the wall, and that creates a situation where you have the capsule forming a a much greater than 90-degree corner, and you can actually run into that corner and kind of get stuck. And if you keep jumping and doing stuff like that, essentially the collision and the physics of the character kind of breaks, and I couldn't find I don't think there's really a solution for that other than don't use a moving capsule. I tried actually using a box as well, and that didn't work. But yeah, so my solution for that is this kind of collision wall that is a very specific distance. Like the thickness of this is very specific to the player character capsule size. So I can stand in between this. So this collision wall will only block the boss and will not block the player. So I can stand there and be safe. As far as collision is concerned, the boss can never walk into me and force his capsule like against the main collision wall, which is just inside there, and and that and kind of create bad physics from happening. So just to demonstrate all of this. So I'm talking a lot, but it's actually a lot of stuff to explain just what's going on, because it's hard to look at it like this and see, oh, that's happening or whatever. So you'll see he steps forward when he attacks like that, and there he stops there, and he's just in a nice range, and I can still move a little closer to him, but so you see he's blocking me now, and that's because his capsule is now scaled much bigger. So if I put him into a stunned position, you can see now I can move a little closer to him. I think, did I set it up? I think I did. Okay, no, I didn't set it up correctly yet, but anyway, so I'm supposed to reset his capsule there, so you can actually move a little closer to him. But yeah, so he'll stop way short of interacting with you collision wise, and you can still move a little closer but not too close. And with this external collision barrier, or force field or whatever, so you can see the boss can never get actually closer than that. So he can still hit me just fine, but he can never force his collision capsule into a position where where I can get forced into this corner, for instance. I'm always free to move around him. So yeah, so that's how that sort of works. Yeah, and I mean, like right now he can't kill me or hit me because I'm just going to show the block breaking, the block breaker or whatever. So my enemy weapons are it's actually a separate blueprint, and I did it like that just so that it's easy to do like a separate, like, because I have the sword and the axe enemy. So even though this guy doesn't have a separate weapon, his actual weapon damage, let's do, because I think his damage is going to be about 75 or something. We'll see. Essentially he's going to be able to kill you in 2 hits. I might make it so that it's 3 hits. We'll see. I might do difficulty levels or something. I still need to put stuff in here to regen for some ability to get some health regen. Hopefully this still works. Yeah, okay, cool. So you can break your block there. And dead. And he should have actually stopped attacking there, but anyway, he did. Oh, he was still in his final attack. Okay, cool. But he did stop attacking. So he's now essentially sort of disabled, and now he's gonna come back. So there's some other special stuff that's happening in here that, like the camera for instance, is sort of a new sort of special case setup where you see it kind of zooms out when you get far away and zooms in when you're close. So I had a camera like that before, but I had to update a little bit specifically for this boss so that it works. It works on essentially dynamically and a dynamic position and all around him. Like my previous one was based on a static position because it was actually created for the final boss, and that's actually static. It's actually a static character, and it's also only from the left. So it was a very specific setup, so I had to create a new branch in that camera blueprint section. And then also, so you can see there's my respawn point, that star on the ground. So that's a dynamic system that'll always update, like as far as you go. Like it'll just dynamically go, and if it's valid, like if you're not jumping or doing anything weird, it'll actually update the position so you can respawn sort of close to where you were. So I just had to create also a trigger that overrides that and specifically forces the respawn to be up there, so if the boss kills you, you respawn there. You can't have the respawn point will never generate down here. So that's just a little bit of special case thing where I need to it's just a blueprint that I created, so it's just pretty simple. Just essentially interrupt the dynamic spawn point and force a specific one based on this point there. And yeah, it does some other things, like this trigger, there's a second trigger there. It just tells my my player pawn that okay, now I'm fighting a boss, and some different things need to happen when I'm fighting the boss. And then when you untrigger that, you know, it goes back to normal. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the mini boss stuff there. Show quickly the animation. So he's got very few animations. I mean, if you compare it to the character with the most animations, is of course the ninja. So these are actually all the imported animations, and though it's not that many, it's definitely the most of any character. But the ninja still actually needs quite a bit of animation done. I'm just putting it off until the game is essentially done. Like, I want to be able to play the game from start to finish before I do any of that stuff. So to me, all of that is just extra stuff. It's not really gonna make the gameplay any different. It's just gonna make it look different because there's gonna be variation instead of seeing the same thing over and over. And the same goes for the enemies. Like, you know, the enemies all have basically just the basics to make them work, and even if I add stuff to it, it's not going to make them work any different. It's not going to change the gameplay. It's just visual. And yeah, so I will decide if I sort of, you know, do that or not. If I want to put more work into it after that. But yeah, I just wanted to show the mini boss in action. It's pretty cool. It's been pretty fun trying to make all this stuff work. Sometimes I have a lot of like, it's especially sort of difficult to retrofit like the existing enemy for this. Like, it's like, if you just look at the blueprint mess, right? And I mean, this area I've cleaned up quite a lot, because I've done a bunch of stuff here that I changed that the original enemy doesn't have. But yeah, this is just sort of my latest thing. And I mean, it's not super clean to begin with, but at least I tried to create captions for most things. The one thing I still need to do, which is something I might leave for later, is for the final move. Like, with the small enemies, you basically cut their body in half when you do a special move on them to kill them. And for the boss, I want to do cut his head off when you do the final kill move. That's something I will do. Something that I would like to do that I won't do right now. I'll decide that. I have sort of a list of stuff in my head. I don't keep lists of anything physically, I just keep it all in my head, basically. So I have a list of stuff in my head, and that includes being able to cut off limbs, especially for the boss. So that would be pretty cool. But yeah, that's sort of a different thing altogether. But yeah, so for now, I think it'll be I'll see how he plays and how difficult he is and stuff like that. But he needs to be fairly difficult. I actually would make this game generally fairly difficult. We'll see how it works out. I've made some recent changes to the small enemies to make them more difficult. They're faster and a little bit more aggressive and stuff like that, just in their behavior. Their behavior before was a little bit sluggish, and with the way the animations were done, it wasn't didn't feel aggressive enough. And really, they also need a bit of animation work. But okay, so before I ramble too long, I wanted to say, before I start rambling, I've been rambling for an hour. I'm gonna end the video here, and if you got this far, it's good on you. But yeah, like, if, as I say in my videos, usually, if there are any questions about any of the stuff that I'm working on, please feel free. I have no problem sharing pretty much anything I do on this game. That's the whole point of these videos, is just to share what I do and how I do it. It's just to show that there's no one specific way to make a game. I think my game is proof of that. If you look at how badly it's made, how much of a mess the scripting in this stuff is. I've learned a lot since starting this game, and so if I did this again, it would certainly be a lot more different. I have to kind of work within what I already created, and so when I expand on the stuff that I have now, it's expanding something that probably should have been better and more efficient and simpler even in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases I went back and actually replaced things with simpler versions of the same thing. But I can't do it on everything. It'll take me forever. This project's already taking so long. So yeah, it's just to show the kind of stuff that goes into this project. And I'm not showing every single thing in detail, but I've shown a little bit of just about everything, and I've shown a lot of some stuff. But I have no problem talking about anything I do in the project, so yeah, feel free to ask me anything if you want to know more. And yeah, thanks for watching.